Welcome to the Sellernomics podcast, where we share valuable tips and information in the Amazon and e-commerce space. Each week, we deliver the best interviews with some of the top Amazon personalities in the industry to help you grow your business. Today's episode is brought to you by Getida, the global leader in FBA auditing and reimbursements. Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at Getida.com/Sellernomics. And now, here are your hosts, Rob Stanley and Lisa Kinski.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to today's episode of Sellernomics. My name is Lisa Kinski, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rob Stanley. And today's guest, a very dear, sweet friend of ours, we have Yoni Kozminski with MultiplyMii. Yoni, how are you?
Guys, I'm good. It is great to be here. Good to see you.
So good to see you. It's always a pleasure to see you virtually and in person. So we're very excited to have you on today. But let's jump straight into it. So the topic of conversation for today, everyone, is how to scale your Amazon business for optimal growth. And I don't think that it's a secret that a lot of sellers are struggling with profit margin compression right now. And so just more of a, less of a tactical question, but more of just like thought leadership, I guess, or your perspective. How can sellers scale their business in difficult times like this? I mean, is it time to scale? Should we just hold steady? Like, what are you seeing and what are you experiencing?
So from my perspective, I would say that, it's no surprise to any of us that these are definitely challenging times, and it's been quite a challenging market from a whole lot of factors. But what I would say is the very best entrepreneurs and the best business leaders are still going to make it make sense. At the end of the day, just because there are challenges thrown at you. I mean, this is entrepreneurship, and this is what it's like to build an e-commerce business in general. So I would say that it's always the right time to scale a business, and I don't think you should ever pull your foot off of the gas. And when it comes to challenging times, and one of the big shifts that we've seen is that before, and let's call it sort of the rise of the aggregator space, it was revenue growth at all costs. That was sort of the name of the game. We don't care about profitability. We just care about revenue growth. We've sort of had a real reset, and now it is all about profitability. We want to see profitability. We want to see profitability. That's a healthy business. That's how you should be building businesses in the first place. So when it comes to building and scaling businesses and looking at it from that lens, you should always be looking at the bottom line, and you should always be looking at what can I do regardless of the environment to grow the business, and look at what my operating expenses are, look at what my actual LTV, cost per acquisition, looks like, and actually bringing it all together to make the business make sense for the long term. So, let's just say that's my opening statement here, because I know we're going to get deep into some of the nuanced details here.
Yeah, that's a good point you just brought up. And actually, let's dive deep. So we're seeing a lot of the margin shrinking here. We're seeing fees going up on Amazon side. We're seeing tariffs. We're seeing a lot of things changing. What are you seeing some of the Amazon sellers doing to kind of offset that? Are they moving, let's say, from China to India or Mexico? Like, what kind of tips have you seen that are maybe to try to offset some of these shrinking margins?
So one thing that I've definitely seen, I would say it helps that I'm operating in a business that leverages remote talent. But I've definitely seen when before it was definitely something that people were very open to, particularly in the US, to working with other geographies like Pakistan, India, Philippines, etc. I would say that I'm definitely seeing more and more people looking to leverage it, and looking to leverage it in a more meaningful way. And what I mean by that is, historically, a lot of the e-commerce community looked at talent in the Philippines as VAs, virtual assistants that could do really baseline tasks. And through time and through experience, I think the entire ecosystem is starting to realize that you can actually bring people in to do roles that can have real accountability. So, having PPC managers or designers or project managers or customer support reps, actual defined roles that are not based on task lists is one example. And I know Getida has a massive footprint in the Philippines, and it's, I think it's into the triple digits if I'm not mistaken. So, you guys have been quite aware of the capabilities that exist there for some time. And when you build the right operating arrangements. So, I know you have a much larger team, US based, and so it's about finding that balance. It's about saying, how do I continue to have sort of the brains of the operation, if you will, the people that are driving the strategy, doing so, but actually elevating them to a point whereby they can focus on the things that are going to move the needle for the business. So I would say that's one thing that I'm seeing. I would say outside of that, and to your question, Rob, I would say the move away from China as the only option. I think that also comes to a topic that may come up here as well, is that just like Amazon and its more than 50% share of all e-commerce sales in the US, I think that people are starting to expand beyond just Amazon and exploring other marketplaces like Walmart. And, I continue to hear more and more people diving into Shopify and proper email marketing and paid media strategies and things like that. So I think that what's happening is that people are actually also looking at alternative ways to hedge their bets, if you will, and not have 100% concentration on whether it's a marketplace or, in this case, whether it's a specific country that is the only place where you can actually source your products from.
Yeah. I was thinking as you were talking about how, sellers are really diversifying onto different marketplaces like Walmart and Shopify. And at the same time, Amazon's talking about coming up with a product or products or a site kind of like Temu and Shein that's really going to impact some of those lower price point sellers that are, selling on Amazon right now. And I don't know, it just, everything is changing so much. There's like too much to really get our hands around. But when we're talking about delegating out some of these tasks and finding talent outside of the US that is going to, I guess by nature, be more cost effective, how do you know what to delegate first? Like, what should be the task list of, okay, here is the thing that is important that I don't necessarily need to be doing myself, and I need somebody to be doing it now or in 6 months. Like, just walk us through the process of that.
Great question, Lisa. So I would say, first off, it depends on where you sit on the spectrum. So if you've built a team, if you're hiring, if you're used to that, we'll address that second. If you are someone who has been selling on platform for an extended period, you're struggling to get your hands around the business. Let's say you're doing between $1 million and $2 million in revenue. You're still a solopreneur trying to handle everything and it's getting away from you. I would say the advice I would give is the first thing you need to do is get clarity on what you're actually working on and what is taking up a tremendous amount of your time. So really simple task here. 1, block your calendar out when you are doing work. It's not about having external meetings. Set up your calendar to dictate, I'm doing keyword research for the next 2 hours. I'm doing listing optimization. I am working on my supply chain and inventory. I'm trying to improve my look at how you are spending your probably 60 or 70 hours a week, but I hope it's a lot less than that. And quantify how you're doing it. If you use, it's free inside of Google Calendar, you can literally put in and type in all the different tasks. It's color coded. That's how my calendar looks. And so that's the first step. Once you have clarity on how you're operating, you get a good holistic picture of where you're investing your time. The next thing you want to do is you want to say, right, from a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being something that needs to be you, mark those tasks a 5. If there's something that doesn't need to be you, mark them a 1 or a 2. Example of a 5 would be, like every founder of any e-commerce business, virtually in the history of e-commerce, you want to be the one who decides what products and what the brand is selling. And so that's typically going to be a 5. Now, if you can break that up into subtasks, so the keyword research around your product idea doesn't need to be you. So make sure when you're sort of building your calendar and how you're leveraging your time, build it into sort of the most granularity that you can so you can really understand. At the end of the week, when you audit it and you say, right, I've spent my 40, 50, 60 hours, and this is how I'm spending my time, look at all those 1s and 2s and even 3s, the things that don't need to be you. And then what you want to do is you're going to look at it and you're going to say, right, what is the connective tissue? So the mistake that a lot of people make is that they'll say, right, anything from 1 to 3, I'm just going to get it off my plate. And I'm going to find one generalist who is going to be able to solve all of my worldly problems. And the reality is you get a master or a jack of all trades, a master of none if you take that approach. So what I would do is I would effectively skill batch what that looks like. So for example, keyword research, PPC management, those are types, inventory management, those are types of number driven decisions and quite analytical in nature. So you could potentially house a role that fits that. What you don't want to do is have your designer, CFO, art director, and PPC manager all wrapped into one individual. I can all but guess that that's not going to go exactly how you had envisaged it in your mind. So I would say that's how you can approach it. And then once you go through that, then you would build the job description, you would bring it out. One really important thing to do, let's say you don't want to launch into that process and say I want to hire straight away. What you can do is, let's say you do it over 2 or 3 or 4 weeks and you get some real clarity and you understand sort of the repetition. I would also add in one layer and say, was it effective? In the time that I was spending in doing that work, was it effective? Was it something that I was passionate about? I felt I was good at doing? Because there's 2 ways in which you could approach that delegation. You could try and either go through the lowest hanging fruits, the things that you feel are quite easy, or you could say, you know what? I don't possess these skill sets. I'm a terrible designer. I would rather, because it's so important, I launch so many products, and we all know how important your creative is when it comes to each of your image listings and your EBC and your A+ content and everything that's related to presenting your brand. You could say, you know what, I'm going to delegate something that I don't have that skill set to, and that becomes something that's pertinent to your growth. So those would be the 2 approaches if I were just starting out.
Yeah. And Yoni, I love how you put that, like getting a calendar and really organizing what your day looks like, probably 60-hour day, but what your day looks like, and then of course, setting like a 5 or a 1, what is the different, heat of it? What is the things I should be handling versus off things to other people? And then describing what those actually are. What are those descriptions of those things? Once you kind of got to that point, is it also like, should you maybe create like an org chart or accountability chart of some sort? A lot of companies tend to do that, right? Like they'll say, even though you don't have a person for it, you're like, hey, this is a person or a role I want to fill. Therefore, like an org chart, accountability chart. What's your kind of thoughts on that?
So this, let's that's a great direction when we talk about sort of the slightly more mature, professional that's had more time and has actually built a team. So, when it comes to that first hire, whether it's org or accountability chart, you're the boss and there's going to be someone working in your team. But as it becomes a little bit more expansive and you have, let's say, a team of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 50 or 100, as you're growing, that's when it becomes really important. So I would say that let's first make the clear distinction between organizational chart and accountability chart. So organizational charts are there more so as you're a larger business where you have really clear reporting lines. So who is reporting to who and what are those specific structures? So I am managing a team of 5. They all directly report into me. And this is what our weekly review and quarterly review looks like. And that's one aspect of building a company. I would argue, though, the more important thing, and particularly as you're sort of getting your feet wet and starting to understand how to build companies, is your accountability chart. So even if you're a really small business, when it comes to accountability, it's the number one thing that will drive your business into the clearly defined direction that you want to take it, assuming you've taken the time to build out your vision and have a clear, whether it's a 6, 12, 18, 36-month roadmap, what does it look like, or 10-year vision, or big, hairy, audacious goal, your BHAG for 20 years. So, when you're going about it that way, and when we talk about an accountability chart, let's take the 3 of us, for example, and let's say that we're all producing this podcast together. So while, the 2 of you is a great example. So both of you are co-hosting this podcast, right? But on the back of this podcast, there's a lot of things that need to happen. There's, behind the scenes, there's a lot of preparation work, identifying the guests, getting them to fill out the questions. There's the pre kickoff, the post production. There's a lot of things that happen. And so while you both are co-hosting and accountable for the success of this podcast, each of you will have specific accountabilities on who's handling the sourcing of potential guests and what does that onboarding look like. And it needs to be one specific person that's accountable, because if both of you are accountable for all of that, even though you might be collectively responsible for the success or failure of the podcast. The reality is you always want to know where to point your finger. And it's not just about like you did wrong, but it's also congratulating the person that actually achieved success. So typically when we talk about an accountability chart, you'll have 3 to 5 accountabilities for each of the core individuals that will be inside of it. And when you're a small company, you might be wearing a lot of accountability. So if you're literally just started your business a year ago and there's a couple of you in the business, you're probably doing everything from accounts payable, receivable, finance function, all the way through to inventory management and dealing with 3PL, supply chain, like you have all of these accountabilities. And as your organization grows, so too can the reduction of accountabilities be taken away from you and go toward new team members in the organization that then start to have those accountabilities. So you can have you could effectively have your name in a lot of different boxes in an accountability chart. In an org chart, your name will only be in one specific spot.
I really appreciate the distinction between the two, because I think a lot of people either assume that the org just serves as an accountability, or they don't even know what accountability chart is. And it, a lot of double work is done. A lot of things slip through the cracks. So I really appreciate that, Yoni. We are going to take a quick break and hear a message from our sponsor. And when we come back, we have a very exciting kind of verbal case study to walk you guys through. So we'll be back in just a second.
Elevate your Amazon profits easily with Getida. We specialize in turning lost FBA refunds into profit. For Sellernomics listeners, we have a $400 offer. You get $400 in free reimbursements. To claim your offer, just visit Getida.com/Sellernomics. Let Getida uncover hidden FBA refunds so you can maximize and boost your Amazon profits today.
Y'all heard Yoni. Go over to Getida.com/Sellernomics for your first 400 in FBA reimbursements free. We are back with Yoni Kozminski, not to be confused with our in-house Yoni. And Yoni, I want to talk more about, you had done a presentation at Prosper earlier this year, and it was really an awesome case study that we'd like for you to walk us through, talking about the topic of today's conversation, which is scaling your Amazon business for growth. So do you mind just kind of like walking us through that example of how this particular seller was able to start her business and scale it, and what are some of the strategies that she enacted to do that?
Absolutely. So I'll start off and I'll say that I'm trying to remember the exact title of the presentation, but it's why you're not breaching the 8-figure ceiling when it comes to revenue, and doing so profitably. And so that was the whole premise of the case study, was how did this incredible woman, her name's Wendy, go from solopreneur with a passion project. She had a company called Whimsy Flask, which were these flasks, much like Hydro Flask, but had much more creative design elements toward it. And she went from no revenue to nearly $1 million in her first year, managed to more than double up in her second year, moved from that side hustle solopreneur to starting to build out a little bit of a freelance / in-house team. Year 3 hits, I think, about 4.5 million in revenue. It's going great. Her profit margins are shrinking. So she went from about 22% net profit margins, or EBITDA margin, in year 1 to about 8.5% in year 3. And in that, she had moved her salary to being part of it in a full-time capacity. Before, she didn't have the same heavy operating expenses that she had. It continued to shrink to about 7% in year 5. And we worked with her, and through that process, she was able to go from about 6 million in revenue to 12 million in the subsequent year. And so the case study is all about the things she did to not just accelerate her growth, but to do it profitably. So I'll take you through some of the key learnings here. What I will share is that lucky for the listeners, if this is a topic that interests you, and also thankful for both Rob and Lisa, who are going to put the link to it in the show notes below, where you can watch that whole presentation and you can see sort of the details. You can download the actual the actual presentation that I put together. But the first thing when it came to Wendy and some of the challenges she had from a scalability perspective, how is she able to go from 6 million to 12 million in a single year? One of the biggest and most fundamental things that a lot of founders struggle with, and we talked a little bit about it earlier in the episode, is that it's very hard for people to let go of the product development process, right? Everyone, when we talk about e-commerce founders and we talk about businesses, that's your baby, the brand. What you are bringing into the world is what everyone is so passionate about, and is what most people get into the game for. And so when it came to Wendy, she was a massive bottleneck through that process. Everything from doing her own keyword research and leveraging tools like Helium 10, Jungle Scout, and Data Dive, even using 3 tools like that, which, a lot of them have similar functionalities, not being intentional about it. She would go from the search phase to speaking with the suppliers to driving everything from decision making, and a lot of it would be inside of her head. She would say, right, well, I know that this is going to be a product that's going to work because I know product. I know what the keywords are saying, but I also know what people want, and so I just bring it all together. And I think for a lot of people, they don't realize that they actually have a process that they're running in their head that is, not to offend anyone, but it might be a little bit more repeatable than they think, and aspects of it might be a little bit more delegatable than they think. So one last thing I'll say when it comes to the product development process, or rather product development in general, when we talk about Amazon businesses, is that it's the lifeblood of the growth of your business. And especially, Lisa called out some of the challenges that exist from competition in China and the Temu-esque Amazon play that's going on as we speak, and just the general level of competition that is streaming in from China. You need to be launching new products. You need to be that creative brain that brought you into the e-commerce game in the first place. And so coming back to it, Wendy's business suffered massively because in year 1, before she had all of the things that she needed to deal with, she was able to launch six products. It takes her about 40 to 50 hours every time she's involved in every process to actually bring a product to life. But as the business grew, her ability to get her hands around what needed to happen in order to get the business up and running to launch new products continued to diminish. So it went from 6 products to 5 products in year 2, to 3 products in year 3, to 2 products in year 4, and 1 product in year 5. Year 6 came around and she launched 1 product every single month. And how she did that was by re-engineering the process. So a couple of the key points that I recall from the presentation is, 1, what Wendy had been doing is she'd been, eyeballing effectively what she believed to be a product market fit. And what she did was she actually built really clear criteria around what actually makes a product potential product market fit. So she looked at everything from the profitability margin. It doesn't matter if she can build the best product in the world that everyone's going to like. If it doesn't have plus 20% net profit margins at least, it's no bueno. It's just not going live. It's an impossibility. So that was 1 criteria. 2, sourcing. She couldn't be reliant on a single manufacturer. She had so many times where she'd build great products, but busy season would come, Christmas would come around, and lo and behold, she couldn't actually reap the benefits of all the work she'd done to getting her bestseller ranking to where it was for the Christmas run, only to be deflated in not being able to sell. So she built a whole criteria. I won't go into every aspect of the criteria, but she built a very clear criteria that would decide what is a go and what is a no-go, which was a pretty material shift, because once you understand the parameters of what a go and no-go looks like, all of a sudden she was able to delegate the keyword research, because she understood that these things need to be true when it came to dealing with multiple suppliers. She could put together a brief and say, if you can't do it at this price point, then we have nothing to talk about. So it became really simple, but it also meant that she went from spending 40 hours working through this entire process to having a 30-minute meeting where she'd brought in from the Philippines a product manager who was responsible for actually owning the product live, and a keyword researcher, someone whose sole responsibility was to look at competitors. When I talk about keyword research, I'm talking about new product and also launch strategies. She bundled in those 2 skill sets, or that's 1 skill set, into an individual that allowed it to be quite expansive in her business. And, again, you can see the deck and the numbers inside of it. But from memory, the the product manager who was responsible was getting paid about $15,000 a year, and the keyword researcher was something like $12,000 a year. So she added on circa $25,000 of new operating expenses for that specific function. Obviously, when you go from 6 million to 12 million, there's a whole lot of other operating expenses that go into it. But to keep it in a really like focused thing, just those two inclusions allowed her to build 12 additional products, which was effectively as large, if not larger, than her entire SKU count up until that point. So that was, I'll stop there and just say that was sort of the first step, and something that had a massive impact on her ability to grow her business in quite a short period of time, and doing it profitably without her being the bottleneck in making every single nuanced decision.
Wow, that was a lot, but really detailed, and we appreciate that. I saw Lisa and I were both kind of shocked on a few things you mentioned there, with margins and growth, and then kind of stepping out of the way and stuff. I am kind of curious, and this probably could go deep in a whole nother podcast, but what about when it came to like documenting some of this process from her point of view, putting together either SOPs or training manuals? Like, what did she go through to be able to get kind of to that point, documentation wise?
Yeah. So you're teeing the audience up to watching the video, because in it, you'll actually see what some of her SOPs look like. You'll see what her process maps look like. You'll see what her org and accountability, more her accountability chart actually was the focus in one of the sections. But how we approach process documentation in one of my businesses is that we take a top-down approach. So you sort of look at the business at the 4 or 5 core moving pieces, or the core functions of the business. So for an FBA business, again, it can be slightly different, but just so everyone listening can understand what we're talking about here, it might be product sourcing and development is one core high-level process. You'll have inventory management. You'll have marketing, which would encompass everything from, the paid media buying on Amazon to, giveaways and promotions and lightning deals and external traffic and all of those things. And you'd have customer support. Those might be the 4. And then inside of those 4, you'd have sub processes. So she would have source new product, identify, engineer, develop new product, send product into production. Those might be the 3 sub processes that lead you to, product research and development. And then the next layer down is the detailed step-by-step of what each decision that needs to be made by each individual in the team. So, staying with that sort of sourcing of new product, lineage here would be at our 3rd level. She's documenting out and saying, right, the sourcing associate, identifies the keywords or identifies the sourcing partner. Then the next decision is, do I need an engineer in order for me to actually bring this to market? If yes, find engineer. From there, source product from supplier, and that might be from your sourcing specialist. So you need to sort of go through that process, and I would look at it the way we look at SOP, standard operating procedures, and how all this is that you need to understand operationally what's happening in the business. So this is sort of giving you the high level perspective of what are the interactive points between each stage of the business, from sourcing a product to, inventory management, to getting it to, listing, to launching a product. What's really interesting, like product launch is probably the busiest component of any aspect of a business, because you need supply chain and logistics to link up. You need to get your UPC code set up. You need to actually, set, like, there's so many things, all the creative, EBC, everything goes into it. And while it seems like really simple, well, I've done all the hard yards, I've built the product, I've got it. It's actually a complicated part of the process. So coming back to it, her level of documentation was pretty dense at that point. And this is before you even go to the standard operating procedures level, just to get that clarity and saying, okay, this is what I'm doing today. Again, when I go through the video, and this stuff it's one of those things. If you're listening to this and you're not watching, and I don't have any visual cues, A, it's not the sexiest topic, but B, it's a hard one to follow along. You kind of need the visual cues to really understand sort of the nuanced detail and what this actually looks like. But coming back to your question, Rob, so she has an ability to understand every decision that's going into the business, and she can visually see that mapped out. And on the back of it, anyone can step into it and say, right, this is how everything interacts. And it's only through that first step of drawing those process maps out that you can actually make improvements. You can actually start to say, you know what, this is taking too much time, or something's going to fall off, or who's going to be accountable for this handoff and this, this handover meeting. So that's the level that you really need when it comes to just understanding how to build that operation. And then you go even deeper when it's, I want someone else to be performing these tasks, and I don't want to be accountable, responsible. I don't even want to be consulted. I just want it done, and I want to get a report once a week that tells me where it's at and I can chime in. That's when you need to go to the standard operating procedure, working activities and instructions level.
And I want to give a quick shout out here. In addition, for anybody who doesn't know, in addition to being the co-founder of MultiplyMii, Yoni is also the co-founder of a company called Escala. And we had his business partner on a while ago named Lippy. And there are some amazing resources on the Escala website at weareescala.com for those e-com SOPs that you were talking about, Yoni, and for the accountability and organizational chart. So I want to direct people there for those resources. And then as well as to the video that you had referenced, we'll be sure to plug it in the show notes for the full case study. You can see everything that Wendy did, how her business grew, etc., through Yoni's presentation. But at this point now, Yoni, we want to give you an opportunity to just plug MultiplyMii and share with us exactly what it is that you guys do and how you're helping sellers and where they can get in touch.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for the opportunity, Lisa. MultiplyMii, it's really simple. We're a Filipino-focused recruitment agency. We help e-commerce businesses find high-level talent. So, I talked a little bit before about virtual assistants. What we're trying to do is to empower sellers to delegate to professionals that can handle everything from account and brand management to PPC to design work, project management, roles like that. Really simple process. It's a pretty white glove experience. We'll come in, we'll help work with you to understand what the role should look like, help build in everything that relates to culture and what is the right fit for you. We'll do the sourcing, vetting, recruiting. We'll bring it to a point where we just give you the top 3 candidates. And if one of them is great, awesome, off we go, and we'll help integrate them into your business. If not, we'll continue to search. We work on a success-based model. And, we're placing a considerable amount of people into e-commerce businesses each and every month. That's really what we do.
Awesome. And nice. For anybody who's listening and doesn't have the company name in front of them, MultiplyMii is spelled MultiplyMii. So you guys can check out their website at multiplymii.com, and you can reach out to Yoni directly at Yoni, YONI, at multiplymii.com. Yoni, I have to ask, is the me in MultiplyMii at all inspired by the we characters, the me's that you would make? Because I think they spell it MII too.
So truthfully, the website wasn't available, but it's funny. There's a car that kind of remember the brand. I think it's a either Japanese or Chinese make, and I see them around the city everywhere, and it says it's all about me, MII, and I just find it so funny to see it. But the name's actually inspired by an incredible book. Not that you guys are asking me, but there's a woman named Liz Wiseman who wrote a book called Multipliers, and it's how the best leaders make those around them great. And so after reading that book, it was that, in conjunction with the idea that we're actually helping bring additional people into their business. And so that was where it came together. That's
awesome. I love it. Awesome. We'll be sure to link the book in the description as well. Rob, any last questions or thoughts for Yoni before we sign off?
No, that was great information. And again, be sure to check out in the description for the link to go check out that whole presentation and all the great charts and everything that are in there that we didn't get to share on an audio podcast. But thanks so much, Yoni. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing this great information to help Amazon sellers scale and their business and help them grow. So
Thanks for having me. As always, I just hope that anyone who's listened up until this point got some value, at least a couple of nuggets out of it.
We are sure that they did, and the pleasure is ours to host you, Yoni. Thank you so much for everyone who tuned in today. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts with us in the comments, subscribe to the show, and we will see you all on the next one.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Sellernomics podcast. Special thanks to our sponsor, Getida. Did you know that Amazon probably owes you money for FBA reimbursements? Get $400 in free FBA reimbursements at Getida.com/Sellernomics. Be sure to join us again next week for more great tips on how to grow your business. And thanks again for listening.